Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and it's time for a long overdue full review. This is my Shiro Quantum. My friends all make fun of me because I can never figure out how I'm supposed to say Shirogorov. I think I might have just said it right. Is it Shirogorov or Shirogorov? Shirogorov? I'm going to call it a Shiro. It is a Russian Shiro Quantum. I've had this knife now for a couple months. It's taken me way too long to do this full review. I could have done it honestly probably in the first week and a half that I had it, because I carried this knife like crazy when I got it. I've carried it a lot since. It has become one of my favorite knives to put in pocket and carry and do cutting with. It's a really great knife in a lot of ways. So we're going to talk about it. I'll go through my typical kind of carry, cutting, ergos, and action, and we'll talk through what I've found on this knife. First, I'll say, so this started out its life as one of the blue anodized versions of this knife, and the first owner, the guy who I bought it from in Canada, de-anodized it, which is fine with me because I prefer the gray to the blue. That's more my style, I think, at the end of the day. So this one, it has probably a slightly different finish from the ones that come like gray from factory. It's probably a little bit darker. I assume he used something like Wink rust and stain remover or whatever. That's what I do when I de-anodize. I don't know for sure what he did, but it's been de-anodized. So this one is a little bit unique in that sense, but functionally I'm pretty sure it's perfect. I don't think there's anything wrong with this knife. Yeah, so I picked this up on the secondary market. I got it used for a very good price compared to what they cost new. Brand new, these knives go for like $1,100 if you get one from like Recon One or something. Paid a couple hundred less than that, which felt really good. And I don't know what has happened in the last few weeks. Apparently there's no more of these available at retailers. For a while it seemed like it was pretty easy to get one at retail, and they were relatively plentiful on the secondary market. But I've gotten at least 5 messages out of the blue, just DMs on Instagram, from people asking if I'd be willing to sell this knife. I think, spoiler alert, I might sell it just because it's worth a pretty penny. And now that I'm done reviewing it, it's one of those where it'll be very easy for it to be like, it was great to have and to check out. But now that I've reviewed it, how often is it going to go in pocket? It probably would if I keep it, but I don't know. The money sounds good too. So we'll see. Time will tell, but I may end up moving this piece along because there seems to be demand for them at the moment. But yeah, so I've treated this honestly kind of like a user. It's got a few scuffs on it here and there, like the scratch on the clip. I guess it's not really a bad scratch. A lot of it is just the oils from my hands make it look like there's wear on it, but still on the factory edge, still a fantastic knife. And there we go, middle finger flick. Yeah, let's talk about what it's made of, and then we'll just kind of jump in. So blade steel on this is M390. It has what almost looks kind of like a Persian style blade, but it's not really upswept when you look at it. I think it's more so the way the belly of the blade is shaped kind of makes it like an optical illusion as if the tip is upswept. But yeah, not typically my style, but for some reason I just feel like it works here. So M390 blade steel with a very tall flat grind. You do have this fuller in here, which if you're good, can kind of work for middle finger flicking. It's not fantastic for it, so I wouldn't say buy this knife with the expectation that it's going to be a great middle finger flicker. Titanium hardware, titanium scales, titanium clip, which is set down kind of into the lock bar relief. I thought that was going to suck. We'll talk more about that. It doesn't suck. Lock bar insert, the hardened interface, and I believe also an over travel stop. Yep. So it's got a fairly simple construction in terms of materials. It's a titanium frame lock with M390, but it's not just another titanium frame lock with M390. There's a lot of them on the market now. This knife feels pretty special to me. There's a lot of internal milling for weight reduction, and a really nice, cool back spacer. Also titanium. It's just a classy looking knife, in my opinion. And it's big, but it's not huge like some Shiros are. So that's kind of where we're jumping off. All right, so let's start with ergos. Ergonomically, I really, really like the Quantum. It's kind of got this main groove up here that my pointer and middle finger land into, and then a secondary groove back here. They fit my hand perfectly, these grooves. And they're also not so, this groove isn't so defined that even if I landed, like if I put my middle finger right on that hump, it's still not uncomfortable. It's not forcing me into any grip, but it does feel good when I'm in it. Yeah, it's neutral enough that it feels very comfortable. I can kind of move around. I can choke back. I can kind of choke forward. There's not really a choil or anything, but if I need to, I can put my finger up here for a little detail work. It's just very comfortable in a saber grip. Got a little bit of jimping here. In this case, my thumb does actually tend to land right there. It is spaced well for my thumb to land on it. I'll say that. And it just works. It's comfortable. It's not aggressive jimping. It's just enough that I can kind of index and feel that it's there, but it's not tearing up my thumb or anything, so the jimping doesn't bother me, which oftentimes jimping does. Hammer grip, also super comfortable. So yeah, hammer, saber, it's all good. Draw cut, very comfortable, totally works. Reverse grip, super, super comfortable. I really like the shape of the back of the knife, so I can rest my thumb up here. That's just, it's a great usable grip. Reverse grip draw cut, even that is quite comfortable. So the handle's neutral enough that it's comfortable in every orientation, but it's also got enough shaping that it doesn't feel slick, because there's really not much texture going on here. You've got this milling, which is, I'd say, more decorative than anything else. It feels comfortable in hand, but it's not like locking me into the knife. The pocket clip doesn't give me any hot spots, especially because it's kind of sunk down relatively flush onto the knife, which I like. It's just very, very comfortable. They nailed the ergos, in my opinion, on this knife. Next, let's talk action. So the line of knives from Shiro, I've often just like the talking point surrounding them tends to be the action. They're snappy on deployment, and they are very drop shutty and smooth. This one in particular, this model, I should say, runs on the multi-row bearing system. And so instead of just a single row of bearings, you've got multiple rows of bearings. That's just extra surface area for smoothness, I guess, and it works. It's very smooth, very glassy, and drop shutty. I feel like sometimes people describe knives that are smooth but not drop shutty as glassy, like the Sebenza. I'm not going to go down in the weeds onto that, but I've even done it on some knives. Like I probably said it on like the Spyderco Swish Bowie. It's not drop shutty at all, but it's very smooth and it's glassy. This is drop shutty and glassy, which is fun. It almost feels, I don't know, it kind of feels like a knife that's on washers in some ways, even though I know it's on bearings and it's on multi-row bearings, but it's like, it's got an inherent smoothness beyond what I typically feel in knives on bearings. It feels similar in terms of action to knives like my Koenig Arius or like the Holt Spectre. Different for sure, but kind of on that same level, if you will. Very, very smooth, very drop shutty. Technically, I guess you could argue there's two methods of deployment with this fuller, but it's not easy to nail every time, as you can see. And I'm someone who middle finger flicks all the things. It's my favorite deployment method. This one, it's like, you can do it. I guess I have an easier time when I'm not doing it for the camera. Down here, it's working better for me, but it's not the greatest middle finger flick. It's not as satisfying as having a proper hole or a fuller that's placed a little better where it's designed to do that. This one just happens to kind of work for it. And you can get it. So it's better than just having the flipper, but really this knife is designed to be a flipper. It is a little bit lock bar sensitive, so I've noticed if I'm pressing on the lock bar, it really does require more pressure up here. But if I keep my fingers off the lock bar, man, it's either way, even if my fingers are on the lock bar, I can still deploy the knife. But I slip off now and then, it's not super comfortable. If my fingers are off the lock bar, it's just, it pops, the detent is just right, it flies open, it locks, it's great. It feels weighty too, this big long blade, relatively thick blade stock. It just has this thunk to it that feels really, really nice. And it's like, it's interesting because it's a larger knife, but it's like this weird size blend for me where it's not huge, it's not oversized, but it's like pushing the boundaries of what I would comfortably carry all the time. But it's doing certain things to where it doesn't feel like it's pushing the boundaries. Like most knives in this size, I should say, would be more rare for me to carry than this one is. But because it's so milled out internally and it's actually pretty lightweight, and we'll talk about carry in a second, but the way that it carries is very good. And then the way that it feels in hand doesn't feel cumbersome like some larger knives do to me. It feels, it's balanced in a really nice way. But all right, so that's action. It's a talking point of the knife. The action is phenomenal. Absolutely, really, really good. Let's see. So next, let's talk not ergos. We already did ergos. Let's talk carry because I think that'll be a good one to do next. Like I mentioned already, internally milled out quite a bit, so it's pretty light. The pocket clip is worth talking about in particular because it does set down kind of into this section here where you've got the lock bar cutout, right? So the pocket clip isn't really deep carry. It's not trying to be. It's not a loop over clip, but it actually sinks the knife pretty well down into your pocket. Not a lot sticking out for a non-deep carry clip. As milled titanium clips go, I find I quite like it. I was worried before having this knife and actually putting it into one of my pockets that getting it in and out of pocket was going to suck because you've got the pants have to dip down here into the cutout to get under the clip, and I just saw that as being a hang-up point, and it really hasn't been an issue. Another thing worth mentioning is, I don't know how possible it will be to even show, but the pocket clip isn't resting on the lock bar cutout itself. It's actually resting over on this end on the other side of the cutout. That's where it's contacting the scale at this forward point. So it's just a really kind of ingenious clip design, the way that it's contoured over and it's contacting up here, but you're sliding under from over here, and it's sunk into the knife in a way that seems like it's going to be too shallow, but I haven't found that it's too shallow. In the pants that I wear, the shorts that I wear, whatever I've worn, and I've carried this in virtually every type of pocket that I have, it's been great. It really works well, and I thought it was going to be one of my hang-ups on the knife, and so the fact that it's something I really like about the knife is extra impressive to me, because seeing a pocket clip land like this one does makes me worry. I've seen it not go well before when there's complication of the area where you start putting the knife into your pants. It's a weird way to say that, but it really is done well, and it keeps the whole thing feeling extra slim, that the clip isn't standing so proud off of the knife. I like that a lot. The profile itself is quite slim. It's a thin knife, not too thin. It doesn't feel wispy, but it's a good thin profile. And I feel like most of the weight of this knife actually comes from the blade, but altogether, it's a pretty lightweight package for its size. Like, this is a good full-size knife, and it's all metal construction. They're not really like going for ultra lightweight. I think I've seen there are some carbon versions of these, so if you got like a carbon show scale, it'd probably be even lighter, but they kind of nailed it for carry. For such a big knife, it carries way smaller than it is, and I've never minded having it in pocket regardless of what I've been wearing. Even if I've been in like basketball shorts, which has happened a couple of times, this is a totally fine knife to have in pocket, which shouldn't be the case with a knife of this size and construction. All right, so that brings us to the last category, which would be cutting. As I mentioned, we've got a nice tall flat grind here, almost a full flat, really. There's not much of a flat bevel up above it, but it gets down quite thin behind the edge. It's a really slicey profile. Full flats tend to slice especially well, in my experience, especially through things like cardboard, where it just kind of glides through. And this knife has been an absolute pleasure to do stuff like that with. I've done quite a bit of cardboard. I've cut a couple of apples, which it sliced really well. That's a good metric of how slicey a knife is, in my opinion. If it doesn't like split them, but it slices them, that's good. So I've used it on a couple of apples for my daughter, some cardboard, a lot of packaging, all of my typical type of stuff. packaging materials, small zip ties inside of like toys for my daughter and stuff, clothing tags. I've done a little bit of paracord, just because I like to test on paracord and see how it feels, and it excels at all that stuff. For a knife that seems to me to be kind of like gentlemanly and like it's geared toward collectors and enthusiasts more than it is to like hardcore users and outdoorsmen and stuff, it feels actually, now that I have it, like they really designed this knife to be a solid user. And I wasn't necessarily expecting that from Shiro. And now I want to try more models in their lineup because I like this one so much. I got the Quantum first because its looks. I feel like most of their knives have always looked really vanilla to me. Kind of like the Holt Spectre. It's the same story. Like, I never really wanted a Spectre until I got and loved the haptic. And the haptic, we'll see. I think it'll probably still be my favorite Holt knife, but it made me want a Spectre because the haptic is so good. And the same thing happened here, where it's like I got the Quantum, which is the one that I think looks the coolest, and now that I have it, the other models look way more appealing to me because I know how good this is. And not just like handling it for a minute and seeing how nice the action is and how cool the build is, but how pleasant it's actually been to carry and use has, I think, been the biggest kind of takeaway for me. So I love it. It's a phenomenal knife. I could just as easily keep it as I could sell it. Yeah. The hard thing is I got it for a good price, so I'm really in it for probably less than I should be, but it's still worth a lot of money. And that's the way my collection goes, is I sell things to fund the next things, and so kind of is what it is. We'll see. I may end up not being able to bring myself to sell it, but I also may let it go and keep chasing other things, and that could be how I experience the next Shiro. So time will tell, but it's absolutely phenomenal. I'd recommend it to anybody who's looking kind of in this range of knives. I think it's a fantastic option. It carries well, it feels great in hand, it cuts phenomenally. What am I missing? Oh, and the action is stupid fun. Like, as flipper knives go, it's exceptional. It's at this tier where it's in the conversation for me with the Holt knives and Koenig. It's at that level, and it's just really, really well dialed. So this probably won't be the last Shiro that I own and review, but I'm glad it was the first. I really, really like it, and it's kind of turned me on to the brand. So there you have it. I guess that'll be that. This has been the Shiro Quantum. It's my full review, and it's an exceptional knife. It really is. I like it a lot. So there you have it. Thanks for checking it out, guys. I'll see you on the next one.